will help you with this. Nothing ends here, but the way things end starts here. Nothing ends here, but the way things end starts here. This isn't the termination of travel. It isn't the termination of most stories, but it highly influences the ending of stories that reside on either side of this. So I want to illustrate that with two stories. The first is from Joshua 9, the second from Joshua 10. There's lots of movement through here in the New Testament. Nazareth, Galilee to Jerusalem stories, but they're not recorded. So I have no New Testament events that are here. It didn't change its importance. There just aren't any New Testament events recorded here. So I want to use two, and they both involve the view in front of you, the geography, and the story of the arrival in the land in the book of Joshua. So to catch us up, Israel in Egypt for 400 years, Israel in wilderness for 40 years, then at Jericho, the story for this afternoon, Joshua brings the Israelites across the Jordan River into the area of Jericho and begins to work his way this direction. Think about that for a moment. There's a number of different gateways or avenues that you could use to get into this land. South, north, west, or east. And notice that the Lord is bringing Joshua in. And if you follow the geography of those early chapters in Joshua, it just marches from west to east right into this area. Do you see the logic? Divide and conquer. You've got Canaanite city-states, so you don't have big countries. You have city-states, which means you have villages that have formed a defensive structure, a wall into which they can flee, probably low-level administrative structure, a taxation system, so that you have these sort of little city-states here and there, sometimes mixing it up with one another. We don't have that so much in the Bible as we have it from other Egyptian resources, where the people up here are asking the Egyptians to come up and fix a problem between them. So we kind of have a sense of what it's like up here in terms of the urban and political structure. Joshua and the Israelites are facing numerous city-states, some of which are stronger than others. And the first half of Joshua is about taking the strongest of the city-states, those that would be most difficult for an individual tribal unit to defeat, and make sure that as a corporate whole, the Israelite army takes them on. And we find them right along this corridor, from Jericho to Ai, to Bethel, to Gibeon, and Jerusalem. I mean, these are the major city-states. And once you have success penetrating to the interior here, up the ridge route you go this way, down the ridge route you go this way, and that's exactly what we see in Joshua. First, a collection of city-states that are defeated here, then a collection of city-states that's defeated, major city-states that's defeated in the north. So that's the big picture of what's going on. So we join the story at Joshua 9. Now when all the kings west of the Jordan heard about these things, and what they heard about was the destruction of Jericho, Bethel, and Ai, the kings in the hill country, in the western foothills, and along the entire coast of the Mediterranean Sea as far as Lebanon, Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites came together to wage war against Joshua and Israel. So for the first time, we don't have Israel fighting against a single city-state, but against a coalition of city-states. So this suddenly ratchets up the intensity of these pair of stories we're looking at, because now we're no longer Israel against one, but Israel against many. And the question looms, are we going to be successful when the paradigm changes? We've been successful against a Jericho, a single entity. Will we be successful when many of these come together? However, when the people of Gibeon, suddenly we're here, right here in this arena, When the people of Gibeon heard that what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, out to our east, they resorted to a ruse. They went as a delegation whose donkeys were loaded with worn-out sacks and old wineskins cracked and mended. They put worn and patched sandals on their feet and wore old clothes. All the bread of their food supply was dry and moldy, and they came to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal. Gilgal, northeast of Jericho, out of sight over the horizon line east. And they said to the Israelites, "We have come from a distant country, make a treaty with us." So the Gibeonites were seeing the destruction that the Israelites were wreaking on the land, both east of the Jordan and now west of the Jordan. They said, let's figure out a plan here that doesn't involve our getting killed, which is sort of what the plan B was. And so this is pure theater, right? They are adorning themselves as people from a distant place. They are presenting themselves verbally as people from a distant place. And the Israelites said to the Hivites, "Perhaps you live near us. Perhaps you live near us. So how can we make a treaty with you? We're your servants," they said to Joshua. And Joshua asked, "Who are you and where do you come from?" They answered, "Your servants have come from a very distant country because of the fame of the Lord your God. For we have heard the reports of all that he did in Egypt and all that he did to the two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, Sihon, king of Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan, who reigned in Ashtaroth." Notice that they leave out the nearer, in terms of geography and time, victories. If they talked about those, they might have called attention. We heard these stories, old stories of Egypt, old stories about east of the Jordan. We heard about these. And our elders and all those living in our country said to us, "Take provisions for your journey. Go and meet them and say, 'We're your servants, make a treaty with us.' This bread of ours was warm when we packed it at home on the day we left to come to you. Now look how dry and moldy it is. And these wineskins that we filled were new, but see how cracked they are, and our clothes and sandals were worn out by the very long journey." Now here comes almost every story has one of those sentences where you go, this is what the story's about. Here comes that sentence. The Israelites sampled their provisions but did not inquire of the Lord. So they had all of this experience of trusting the Lord and the Lord delivering these great victories, and they began to feel a little bit too much of their own capacity and said, "Okay, we got this one. This one looks easy. We don't have any walls to knock down. We've just got people from a distant place coming to us, so we'll sample the provisions." Yep, coheres with their storyline, and they make a treaty with them. And that story, I am convinced, is one that Joshua and the elders of Israel would not want preserved for eternity in the book. Because it's a story about Gibeon. And what you need to realize about Gibeon is it's not just any place. It is the place. It is sitting right here in the Benjamin Plateau. It is sitting just north of what would become your religious and political capital. If there's a place that you want to secure and control, it is Gibeon. And this story both explains why Gibeon remained outside of Israelite control and the Hivites were there, and it explains what was going on in the mind's eye of God's people of the past. They had begun to think poorly with regard to how they were conducting the enterprise of war. The story goes on to illustrate how Joshua and the elders of Israel came out the backside of this. They said, "Okay, you presented yourself to us as people from afar. We will treat you as such. We won't destroy your city or you as a people group, but you will become servants who will function as religious assistants, drawing water, cutting firewood for work at the sanctuary, and the sanctuary, after it's at Shiloh," dialing ahead to the next stop, after it's at Shiloh, gets put here at Gibeon. We have the altar and the tabernacle here. Solomon, when he's crowned king, comes down here and asks for wisdom, and that's the location of the sanctuary at his time. So this is a story that both explains why Gibeon was never taken over in part, in whole, why the Gibeonites were assistants in the worship enterprise, why the sanctuary ends up there, a little bit later in time, and for sure shows this interruption in the faith of God's people of the past as they began to trust their own judgment over divine insight. And that story is a corrective story.